topic, going digital, why not embrace something which is environment friendly, saves money, and fits into your smartphone. He is the principal A.T. Kearney. Please put your hands together and welcome our co-moderator and the person who will also make the research presentation, Shubhendu Roy. He is the co-founder Grossomax and the co-moderator of the session, K. Radhakrishnan. Let's welcome the Chief Marketing Officer, Grocery Business, Spencer's Retail, Kuldeep Goyal. He is Assistant Vice President, IT, Burger King. Let's welcome Kiran Komatla. He is the Group CMO and Digital AskMeBazaar.com. Please welcome Manav Sethi. Founder and owner, MeraFoodChoice.com, Piyush Kasliwal. A warm welcome to the founder and Chief Executive Officer, GourmetDelight.in, Raka Chakravarti. Let's hear it for the National Head Merchandising, Big Basket, Sheshu Kumar. He is Vice President Sales, Grofers. A warm welcome to Tapan Malhotra. Okay, fine. The rest of our panelists will join in very shortly. Over to you, Vijay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to all the panelists here. My name is Vijay, and I'm the National Head of Business Development for Zeta. Zeta Meal Vouchers, we are one of the sponsors at this event. And it's my pleasure to be here with all of you and be given a chance to talk about what we are as a company and as a product. Right? So thank you, everyone. Zeta Meal Vouchers, yeah, so we are part of the DirectEye group. DirectEye as an entity is a 400 million plus technology entity which has offices across the world. Today, we have more than 1,500 people. We directly or indirectly reach more than 2 million customers, with all our different businesses. And we have a presence in, across 8 offices, both in India and abroad, right? So these are some of the businesses which DirectEye is part of. So as you can see, it's a host of businesses which include web hosting, which include domain name space registry and so on, meal vouchers, which is Zeta. Zeta is the latest from the DirectEye umbrella, and also businesses in communication, in messaging, and all that, right? So we have a portfolio of businesses. We have been a very strong technology company which has successfully brought out a lot of products into the market, and that's our forte, right? So we are here, we're here to disrupt meal vouchers. And today, as we understand, so if we can have a show of hands, how many of you are aware of Sodexo or Ticket meal vouchers? Brilliant, right? So that's a market which has been there for quite a while, and which is predominantly both those players have really dominated the meal voucher landscape. Just for the few who are not aware, meal vouchers is a product where the Income Tax Act allows you to get benefits, right? Every one of us as an employee can get anywhere, depending on the tax bracket, save anywhere from 7,000 to 13,000 rupees per annum just by opting for these meal vouchers every month, right? And these are issued by your employer and so on. So if you look at current scenario, before I get into the issues, as a market, right, today it's a 4,000 crore market. In terms of, and more than 15 lakh people across the country use these vouchers. So it's a fairly significant proportion of people. What's even more significant is that easily 2 crore people can use it, right? And that's the kind of market size we are talking about. But people are not able to use it because the current systems which are there to enable this are extremely cumbersome. They're extremely inefficient to administer this. And why do I say that? If you look at right now, both from a merchant point of view, there is a huge service charge that they face, right? Every time they have to accept these meal vouchers, right? They have to pay the current establishments a huge service charge, which is completely unnecessary, given what is possible. They face working capital loss, and why is that so? Because when let's say I as a merchant, like say I'm a retail establishment, I could be a restaurant, I could be a large supermarket, I accept say Sodexo or Ticket paper vouchers, there is a time period after which the money comes back, right? And that leads to a significant loss, because I need to wait for me to redeem that amount and that's also not 100% of what I'm supposed to get, right? So there is a significant working capital loss which I currently incur. It's very inconvenient, right? I mean, and many of us as customers would have experienced this. To be able to carry these paper vouchers, to go to a store, to count these vouchers, we do not get change back. So it's a solution which is actually, if you can think about it, it's a solution of the 90s. It cannot be a solution of today. In today's digital world, we cannot have solutions which are paper-based, or card-based and so on. We are, in the era of the smartphone, and that's what, should drive what solutions, we are bringing to the market, right? So we thought, okay, is there time to switch? I mean, should we be doing something about this which completely, is at least 10 times better than whatever current solutions are there, and makes it, enormously compelling for everyone to switch towards this. So introducing, what we call as Zeta. Zeta is a payments platform. In meal vouchers is the first product that we bring to the market. So how does it work? It's completely a smartphone-based meal voucher product. So as a user, if I am an employee, I get money from my employer every month on the phone, and I can go ahead and use it, right? And it's extremely seamless, extremely convenient for corporates to use them. And that's the way it operates. We're completely compliant with all IT guidelines, completely compliant with all RBI guidelines. We have entities like Ernst & Young, KPMG certifying, certifying our compliance levels and so on. So we have pretty much, covered the ground in terms of what it means to bring this to market. We are partnered with RBL Bank, which is our banking partner. So our solution comes with the complete trust and credibility that a banking solution gives you, right? So how does it work? As a user, it's extremely simple. You open the phone, you open the app, you enter the name, amount, you select your meal voucher booklet, as you can see there, and then you click pay, and then you're done. I mean, it's extremely seamless. It's as convenient as a couple of touches, and then your payment is done. I mean, it can't get more convenient than this. You carry your phone all the time, so you will not forget to take it. I mean, there is no question of, counting anything because it's digital. You don't have problems of change, and the money is instant, right? So accepting payments. So from a merchant side of things, how do you accept payments? Let's say when a user comes with this kind of a solution, what do I do to accept this? For this, what I will show is a quick video to demonstrate, how it is extremely easy and seamless, for any retail establishment to accept this payment when a user comes to the store, right? Let me just quickly play that.
Employees are shifting to Zeta for tax benefits. How can you accept Zeta meal vouchers at your store? You can accept this payment using your existing POS with the Zeta Collect card. It works just like any other credit or debit card. Zeta Collect card integrates easily with your existing POS. Here's how you can use it. Start by sharing your exclusive Zeta code with your customer. Your customer uses his Zeta app to initiate the payment. He then shows you the payment receipt on his phone. Note the exclusive 4-digit transaction code displayed by him. Now simply swipe your Zeta Collect card on your existing POS machine. Punch in the amount, and then, when prompted for the PIN, enter this 4-digit Zeta transaction code. The payment will get approved just like any other credit card transaction, and the money will be deposited straight to your bank account. With Zeta Collect card, your money is deposited into your bank account within 24 hours. Transactions using Zeta meal vouchers are extremely simple, easy, and quick. What's more, your outlet will be listed in our Zeta directory so that users can find you easily.
So yeah, so that was the video, which kind of, as a capsule, explain, how as a merchant I can accept these payments. And as I was saying, you would have seen for yourself how it's extremely seamless, right? From me as a user to the merchant, to the corporate who has issued these vouchers to me in the first place. Extremely seamless and easy for the entire process is extremely convenient now, and and in a manner which people can instantly relate to, right? I mean people are so used to using apps for so many things that this is something that is so natural and so convenient to make any payment. Okay. So needless to say, over on top of what I've been saying in terms of convenience and seamlessness, what are the other benefits that I as a merchant gain by accepting this? We are brought in the service charges to an extremely low level. I mean, we charge only 1% to the merchant, and I mean, unlike charges which are like multiple times higher than this in the market, so our charges are extremely low for any merchant who onboards with us. There are no setup costs. I mean, the card that you saw, the MasterCard which the merchant swipe, we give these MasterCards to all the retail establishments, so the cost is borne by us. Okay. There is no integration that you need. Whatever POS you have currently, it works. Whatever EDC machine that you use, at the outlet, it works with that. You don't need any integration at all. So there is absolutely no hassle of any technology team coming into play, or you can just start accepting payments from day one. I mean, we are saying we are going and bringing all these users. So these users come in with money, just accept this money on, at your stores. And one of the most important things that I would submit, and all of you would realize, is that unlike other, say, so-called wallet companies in the market, which have a challenge of bringing money into the phone, right? Like, I mean, they have to keep giving cashbacks and promotions and discounts to get people to load money onto the wallet. We don't have, Zeta does not have that issue. Why? Because the money comes in the user's phone literally every month. As like, instead of getting it in paper or card form, you're getting it digitally. That's the only difference. And this is extremely high level of visibility that a user has, in terms of spends, and and it's extremely convenient now for him. So that's the biggest difference that you all would realize, as a business proposition, what Zeta works on. Okay, so to the retailer, it means a lot of additional business that we bring to the market. And like I said, right, we are here to disrupt this market, which currently is 4,000 crores, but potentially, I mean, it's easily worth 40,000 crores. I mean, that's the kind of market size we are looking to disrupt. Okay. Like I said, it's multi-outlet capable. For us, in rolling this out, whether it's a single store or 10,000 stores, is the same. I mean, and all it needs for the store is to use this card and start accepting these payments. Very fast settlement, right? There's no more waiting for a few weeks to get the money back. Settlements are pretty much instant. It works exactly like how a MasterCard transaction works from the perspective of the retailer. Okay? No storing vouchers. Like I said, it's all completely digital and completely instantaneous. For retailers, we give you a complete interface, so that you can see which are the customers who have come to my stores and who have redeemed it, and when did this happen. We give you extremely high level of analytics for you to be able to drill down which stores of yours are getting very high levels of spends and so on, right? So we have made it extremely useful for you to be able to kind of use this solution. Our onboarding process is extremely fast and simple. We have all you have to do is sign a one-pager agreement with us. You give us a list of your outlets. We go and distribute your cards, and we start sending users there. It's as seamless as that. And it couldn't be really it couldn't be more simple, if I can put it that way. And we have, so we are at IFF. Some of you would have noticed us at the stall. We have a booth just bang opposite, where we are sitting right now. So please do visit us post this session. And for all the retailers or establishments, it could be any kind of establishment, right? All it needs is a food, grocery, and non-alcoholic beverage establishment, which is retailing. Anyone can sign up with us. And for all of you, we have a special offer only for these 3 days, today, tomorrow, and day after. We have completely waived off the commission, even the 1% that we charge, we're completely waiving out for the first full year. Whomsoever signs up with us, and like I said, sign up with us is literally an instant process. You fill a form and you are registered with us. So yeah, visit us at booth B8, as it is called, and looking forward to having. We are really ramping up the presence, right, across the country. Today we have a 150-member team, which Zeta is completely spread across technology, sales, and so on. So we have teams pretty much in all the major cities in India, and ramping up really, really fast. So you will see much more of us as in the days to come. All we are saying is at this event, for retailers, this is a tremendous opportunity to partner with us and just come on board. Come on board and start getting the spends. Just get more business from us. That's our single largest value proposition. All right. So thanks for this opportunity. And we will start this panel. We have a pretty eminent panel here, which we will start the discussion. And yeah, so and as we do this, also please engage with us and continue to do visit the Zeta stall. That's something which I would put it as a request. Okay, thank you.
Let me quickly introduce myself. I'm Shubhendu Roy. I'm a senior principal with A.T. Kearney out of our India office. I'm based out of Gurgaon. It is, right? Okay, I'll be very quick. Don't want to keep us time from the panel discussion. I was told to just kickstart this conversation with not more than 4 or 5 minutes of pages. So I've got exactly 5 pages. Basically, this is about how the online medium, I would not even call it channel, is relevant for food, and what are the questions that today's panel can discuss and debate about. So let me just share 5 messages and move on with this. Now, I'm trying to figure out how this works. Okay, let's assume we can all see this. Just want to show that continuous connectivity, which is the prime driver of online in India, is something which keeps India at an equal stature with the rest of the world. In fact, in many dimensions, it is more than what we would typically call the developed world. So as a statistic, about 53% of Indian people, and this is a very urban-centric research, are connected every hour. That means, I mean, not only all of us, but if you look at our urban centers, half of people who have an option to be connected are actually connected every hour. So this is a huge market, if you will, for the segments. I heard speaker before me speak about the Zeta card. Sorry, yeah? I should, Vijay. Yeah. So Vijay talked about the Zeta card, and he talked about a very huge number, 40,000 crore. Now, all of that would be a subset of this proportion of Indians, right? What is it that they do? That's what this group and panel can discuss and debate about. Okay. More than half of our population are actually shopping online at least once a month. This is not eyeballs, this is not anything other than shopping, right? This is again an urban-centric database, but very important and very enlightening. In fact, the first time this was conducted, this was unbelievable, if I could use the word. But right now, more than half of urban consumers in a demographic trend of less than 25 years are shopping once a month. Not only are they shopping, they are using this channel for across the purchase decision cycle, right? Whether it be discovery, exploration, buying, receiving, and service. So this is a channel that is up there for grabs. Now, why are we discussing that today? Let's talk about food. In food, most of what we have available today would be either our traditional mom and pop grocers or traditional restaurants, our mithai walas, and so on and so forth. For most of these young online savvy customers, they don't offer everything that they seek. But I recently did a study where there was a huge dissonance within customers, and this is not necessarily young customers, but huge dissonance within customers that they say, if I want to do something as simple as organize a party at my house, I have to go to not less than 5 brick and mortar stores to get the entire assortment. One for the food, one for the cake, one for the paper cutlery, and so on and so forth, right? So there is a huge opportunity that the online channel can actually play, not only as an assortment provider, but also an aggregator. And it's up to the channel to figure out what all role does it want to play, because there is an inherent need that's there in the market. Now, I wanted to use this slide as the slide to anchor our conversation. What it means, therefore, for the entire online set of players is how can we get focus, what drives scale, and what is our path to profitability. All things being equal, there are 4 broad questions that need to be answered. Where to play? So which products, which customer segments, which geographies? Why we will win? What gives us the right to be here, right? We have very credible competition. Why do we think we will win? Is it our assortment? Is it our pricing? Is it our delivery model? What is there? How we will win, which is our operating model and all the back-end thing that goes into it, and eventually the path to profitability. Where will we make money through all of this? So let's have a conversation with the esteemed panel, and we'll probably take 10 minutes for each of these themes, and let's go around the table. Yeah? Radha, just wanted to hear your perspectives on the where to play question. Do you think it's a valid question for online, or do you think it's not relevant?
Shumendu, I think first of all we need to say the burning question is we always ask as to what is the reason for a customer to come online. Several months ago I was watching an interview. This is I think when Alibaba was going for their public issue. I was watching on YouTube. They asked Jack Ma about what's the compelling reason for people to come online. I think he had a very simple answer. He said in 5 years' time, you won't even be talking about internet because that's the way to be. It's not a choice. That's the way the future is going to be, whether you like it or you don't like it. Even categories which are not amenable to online will make themselves amenable to online. So where to play it must be prefaced by the fact that this is the paradigm shift. This is the tectonic shift that's happening, that online is here to stay. This is not about eyeballs. It's not flirting with the online business. This is really hardcore e-commerce that's happening. To answer your question as to where to play, I think it's a very difficult question. The consumer is not homogeneous. The consumer needs different things at different times. The consumer buys the same product from different places at different prices, at different qualities, depending on what trade-off they want to make. So it must answer the question, who is my target customer? And that in itself is a very big problem. In grocery retailing, into which I am, Grossomax.com is a online grocery store which sells anything that a hypermarket sells. From meat to doormats, it sells everything else, including eggs. The problem is that if you try to double guess the customer, you'll be doing your disservice by cutting the categories too fine. In the early stages, where to play, you would like to leave the door open a bit. Don't segment the customer too much. We have seen customers from the age group of 22 to 65 who've bought, including WhatsApping the shopping list. Therefore, where to play, it depends on which geography you're in and what's your company's capability in the category to deliver to the customer. The customer is completely heterogeneous. They want so many needs at so many times.
No, that's a very interesting thought, Radha, that you've put on the table. I'm going to request Raka to share her perspectives because you've chosen a pretty niche part of the market. So what went behind this thought, and how would you look at the where to play question?
Yeah, it's very interesting that you asked me this question. Couple of days ago, I was at Startup India in Delhi, the Prime Minister's function, and we heard Travis Kalanick speak about how he started Uber. So the first thing he said was, I couldn't find a cab in Paris. That's when I thought, why don't I start a company myself wherein you can get a cab at the drop of a hat by using technology. For me, pretty much, I think for a lot of people who started out in e-commerce, what mattered was I was in the hospitality business for 10 years. Whenever people came down to restaurants, etc., they would eat in a certain manner. A lot of people wanted to speak to chefs, wanted to find out where to get ingredients from. Most of them knew what to do with it, but where to get the ingredient was the biggest question. And yeah, in India, we've had specialized stores, retail outlets, stocking certain products, but sometimes you wouldn't find a product. by the time you've gotten used to using a particular product in your cooking, in your food, you'd go back to the store, it wouldn't be available. So from there was born my idea of starting Gourmet Delight. I'm a big believer in organic food. I think the West has been using organic for the last 10, 15 years. India has been slow to change. Ironically, we were a country which many years ago used to only eat organic. We've moved out of there. We've started eating a lot of processed food. So I started my e-commerce portal called Gourmet Delight, started out in Bombay. And then we moved to Pune. We find that customers in both cities are very similar. Once they're convinced that the products that you're selling, they're good quality, high quality, we've not had any issue about erosion. Most of the customers come back to us. They request for certain products that they've used abroad, seen, and they can't find it in India. Once we put it on the site, we see more and more customers getting attracted to it. So right now we're in 2 cities. We're hoping to be in multiple cities. We've had customers asking us from other cities as to whether we'll courier stuff to them. Perishables we can't do. Non-perishables we do. But over time, also a very important factor with Gourmet Delight has been that we play a lot on social media. We talk to people about how to use products, how to use edible flowers, what to do with kale, how does kale taste. I think a lot of customers would like to also have a conversation with people who are selling products, just to know what to do with them, how to use them, where do you get it from. So over time, that is crucial. We are strictly an online player. We would like to be somewhere offline so that customers can come talk to us. We can interact with them. I think that's interesting, and that's how we'll grow. Thanks.
Thanks. Seshu, if I can ask you a specific question. You've now been across multiple geographies in India. Is geography more important, or is customer segment more important, or do they don't matter?
Obviously the customer segment. So we have actually sharply defined our customer segment before we even started. So, you know, broadly the customer segment, customer plus product segment, we don't differentiate between the customer and the product. What we have defined is that woman is the primary customer for our business. And basically we target all products which are repetitive in nature. Okay. So we won't sell a furniture item which is bought once in 5 years. But we would sell a home, you know, like a doormat or any of those, which are bought, let us say, once in 3 months or once in 6 months. Okay. Then, you know, and anything which is used for kitchen and home. Okay. So we are leaving the outside users, which can be, you know, all wearables, all toys and games. So all those areas we have left. So basically we have sharply defined the, you know, customer product segment, women, repetitive, and kitchen and home. Then in terms of the geographical segment, it's more, you know, to see as to where we would, which are the areas where there is a clear path to profitability. So we look at the experience of other online retailers, you know, which are large horizontals. Okay. We also look at the internet penetration. And we have identified basically the top 8 metro cities where we offer our complete range and you know, all the models of services which we provide. So basically the, you know, in South, Bangalore, Chennai and Hyderabad. In West, Pune, Ahmedabad, Bombay. North, Delhi and Kolkata. So these 8 cities we are there. And then we are looking at about 17 capital cities or tier 2 cities. So, and if we get them in a cluster, that is better because it is easier to break even that way. So, for example, Andhra, Visakhapatnam and Vijayawada, then, you know, Baroda, Surat in Gujarat, okay, and Indore and Bhopal in Madhya Pradesh. So, we looked at clusters which we can service together so that, you know, we can break even more easily.
So it's a very interesting construct, right? You said customers are definitely at the center and not the geography as such. Do you see a fair amount of homogeneity in customers for similar products across different geographies? So let's say, I mean, a customer in a typical household product, right? Would customer needs in Calcutta be very similar to that of Bombay, Jaipur, etc., or is there homogeneity or is there heterogeneity in the customer's needs in itself?
No, I think homogeneity is something which I think you can never say that it is there in India. So when we start itself, we make up our minds that we will be different stores to different customers in different cities. Okay. Having said that, at a overall level, the proportion of sale of different categories, irrespective of the way we push our products and irrespective of the assortment with which we start, over a period of time we find it exactly fits in the same proportion. So if grocery consumption in India or in one city is, let us say, 37-38%, in other city also it will be between 35 to 40. It never changes far more. And similarly, fruits and vegetables consumption is around 20% of the basket, and we find that it is uniformly between 18 to 22% across all the cities. So the broad levels are always same, but once we get into the product level, it always changes between city to city.
Perfect. So let's move on to the next part of the quadrilateral VC. We'll move to why we think we will win. And Kuldeep, I want to ask you, you come from an organization that is extremely successful, one of the first brick and mortar retailers in India. What drove Spencer's to embrace omni-channel? And I mean, why do you think you'll be successful in omni-channel when we have a whole host of pure play online players available?
So it's a very interesting question. That the company which I represent, it's in Spencer Retail, which runs basically the offline business. We run basically hypermarkets, supermarkets, as well as the convenience stores. So why we found basically this opportunity for getting into the online? So we see that we got a basically huge loyal shopper base with us who comes and shops with us. We got around 18 to 20 lakhs of the loyal shoppers who are associated with Spencer for years together. But AC Nielsen has shown us some database. Modern trade shoppers, out of the 11 trip missions, shops only 2 times at a modern retail outlet, and 9 times they shop somewhere outside it over there. So that's where we found the opportunity that if we get into the basically omni-channel business it over there, so then we can increase the wallet size of the shoppers. The shopper who are not able to come into us during the weekdays and all that, how can basically we reach out to those shoppers it over there? So here basically we would be offering in the same assortment which we carry into our store seat over there. A shopper will always have that confidence it over there, what he or she was buying into the Spencer store it over there. As when she is ordering it over there, she getting the same product. She doesn't have to worry it over there. I order for this particular product, I won't be getting that quality over there. So one is that basically our edge on the assortment, and secondly the consistency in the basically quality, as well as basically the service delivery. That's where we think Spencer is going to be.
So then a follow-up question, and it's an interesting conversation. Can I say then, for Spencer's as an example, it's not necessarily the price or the assortment, but it's more the convenience to a regular Spencer shopper that you're providing?
It's majorly the convenience, and by offering there the width of the assortment for which Spencer is already known in the market. So we already have that width of the assortment, but we want to give in the basically on the top of it the convenience to the shop.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Piyush, if I can ask you a similar question, right? I mean, the business that you are in, what do you think attracts customers to your business? Why do you think you have a right to play in that? So typically in the why we will win, I mean, any thoughts on that?
I'll just give a background what Mera Food Choice is. We deliver food in trains across India. So most of our customers are in the travel when they are requiring the food services. So the first focus comes is the convenience to order food and food of choice. The typical model used to work was vendor driven before this, that whatever a vendor sells, it used to get sold on the trains. Now, where the customer is having a lot of choices and he used to ask for a home delivery or sit in a restaurant and choose his meal, that was not available. Now, with the convenience of omni-channels, the market has changed. Now customers want it in a much better fashion, and in the Indian culture, different people at different places want their food, want that kind of a food. So yes, based on the person, you know, the customer segment, you have to give them what they want. So that's the way. If you channelize out, yes, that's the key to find it out.
Got it. Manav, I want to lead on to you. When we were discussing just a few minutes back before the session started, you mentioned that your organization has chosen, apart from the broader sort of play, to venture into grocery and furniture.
Yeah.
Right? Why these categories? I mean, what's driven this choice?
So if you really look at that, what is it that the major chunk of retail is comprised by in terms of the contribution, right? Even if you exclude online sector out of it, out of total retail, 65% is contributed by groceries, right? Which means that there is no reason why you would not buy your next Ashirwad Atta, Amul Ghee, Pear soap, or ketchup online, provided there is a platform which represents to you that it will deliver within the time frame committed to you. And if I go back to your question number 1 in the slide, which is up and running, I think it is too early to really capture on or to even start identifying customer segments, geographies, etc. Because what we've seen so far, both in terms of the horizontal marketplaces or e-commerce as well as in online grocery, is only tip of the iceberg, right? I mean, nowhere in the world, any format of retail, whether it is grocery or non-grocery, showed you path to profitability or customer segmentation within 2 to 3 or 4 quarters of launching it, right? And India especially is a country where you have humongous population which is latching on to internet and mobile. There is no other geography on the planet which is seeing the kind of growth that we are seeing as far as the mobile and internet adoption is concerned. Imagine a guy who never had access to a particular Nike shoe in Shillong because Nike would not open a store there, whereas the guys there are still, have propensity to buy, and there is a scalable, viable business waiting to be captured. Today, they can order the same Nike shoe online without paying a dime, right? And it'll be delivered at your doorstep. So if you ask me, the consumption models, patterns, etc., are still emerging. It is too early to take a call on them. I think we all are in learning mode. We have done mistakes. We'll continue to do mistakes. I think it is imperative for us to learn and to move forward or redeploy those learnings. So far as we can do that, I think we'll be in the safe zone.
Got it. Kiran, I now want to I want to move to I was actually trying to ask this question. Moving on to the third plank, how we will win. Traditionally, IT has always been considered, right, before the online wave started, IT has always been considered as an enabler and not at the forefront and the reason why we exist, right? And consultants like myself, when we used to make an organization, we used to start with X, Y, Z, and then we would come down to IT more towards the bottom. Do you see with this online push that right now we are an IT-led company, which by the way also sells food, or it's still the other way around?
Throughout my career, I saw supermarkets and departmental stores and a fashion retail, and today I'm representing a quick restaurant. So every organization, every retail organization, IT is an enabler, but at the same time today being online playing and omni-channel into play, IT is not an enabler, but it is also a technology driver for any format of the business. To reach the right customer and to sell the product to the right catchment, or make the customer experience available, IT plays a key role. So it will be, there are many technology firms today are selling the product. It's not that a production company is using technology. It's the other way, it's changing, and it's completely technology dependence today.
Very, very interesting. I mean, I kind of expected this, this conversation. This is a very, very hot topic, right? Radha started this discussion by saying there's going to be a paradigm shift, and I couldn't agree more with what you said. So we never got to connect in the back room.
Yes, yes, Tapan from Grofus.
Yes.
Sorry for the late entry.
No issues, Tapan. Tapan, I wanted to get your perspectives on the operating model and trying to link both why we will win to how we will win. Where do you see the operating model being table stakes? Like, you've got to have it, but I mean, no one cares. And where do you think it really will help provide that competitive edge? Is it in, and I've just listed a few of those, is it in supply chain? Is it in sales and channel? Is it in organization? Is it in the IT architecture? Is it something else?
Yeah, so, you know, the first two things, which is where to play and why we will win, they're fairly straightforward when it comes to online retail or offline retail. So you know what you have to sell. You know how near it needs to be to the consumer. You'll start talking to brands and you'll have the complete assortment ready. Where the differentiation actually comes in is basically technology and operations. And that is what differentiates a lot what do deliver value to the customer and some who are not able to. So, and within operations also, you know, everybody, like Manav said, everybody is experimenting right now. There, at any given point of time, any company is trying to find its own sweet spot. So, within the food service also, there will be hyperlocal players, there will be inventory-led players, there will be hybrid models emerging. So everybody's right now trying to figure out the sweet spot. But how to win is fairly simple. I mean, everybody knows the game plan. Everybody's trying to figure out. So get the biggest assortment. You know, so an offline retailer would be able to capture, let's say, a typical kirana wala will have a 1300 SKU spread. You know, a large retailer would have 10,000 SKUs. You know, we are capturing 2 lakh SKUs. So it doesn't matter if the choice is homogeneous, heterogeneous, you have the complete assortment at any given point of time. The differentiation basically comes in how you're able to get that value across. How does the discovery and exploration, like your previous slide said, a person needs to know that there is so much spread out there in the market, and so on and so forth. So technology and operations is basically how everybody ends up differentiating themselves from the competition. Yeah.
Interesting. Seshu, if I can come back to you, sticking with the which part of the value chain is more important or how we will win. When you look to start a business in a new geography, right? Which part of the value chain gives you the most sleepless nights? And which part of the value chain do you think, you know, I've got it right, I don't need to worry much about it? Is it sales? Is it supply chain? Is it channel management? Is it the IT? Or is it merchandising?
Yeah, see, IT doesn't give sleepless nights because, you know, IT is for the entire country. So when you go to the city, we don't go with a new IT, and whatever has been set up is set up, and we don't do anything new to set up a city. Okay, so what actually is, we basically focus on 2 areas which we think are the most important. First part is the supply chain, okay, and the second part is the merchandising. So the supply chain, basically, you know, we have given, we have 3 promises to the customer. So we say that, you know, whatever you ordered for, we will 100% fill that. And if we don't fill that, we pay a part of that back to the customer. Second one is whatever you ordered for, we'll deliver in time. And if we don't deliver again, we'll pay, you know, a part of that back to you. Third one, we say that, you know, whatever we supply, it will be of 100% quality as expected. And if it is not, we will take it back, okay, irrespective of the cost. So to fulfill these 3 promises, 2 of them are largely supply chain or delivery chain, okay, which is basically ensuring that the fill rate is 100% or as close to 100%, and ensuring that the delivery is on time and all the times. So both of them, we, you know, we do testing for about a month. And maybe now we have reduced it to about 15 days, but we ensure that we get to that 99% plus mark. Only then actually we announce to the world that we have started. So that is the most important thing when we start. Then the next one is basically ensuring that we have the largest range. So we keep a target in terms of the number of SKUs or number of items which we should stock for each region. And typically we ensure that we are at least around 10,000 SKUs before we actually officially launch to the customers. Okay, so that and ensuring that the availability of the products which you have kept on the site, the stockouts are less than a certain percentage. So we have a target for that also. So merchandising and supply chain are the most important things. Okay, and having said that, actually the entire game, it is found on technology. So, without the right technology, we wouldn't have been able to do any of these things. So, we have technology interventions in each and every part of our business, in supply chain, in the warehouse, where we will stock, how we will pick, what time it will take to pick, then in delivery route mapping, which routes to take, which customer is delivered first, which customer is delivered next, that entire this thing. Then ensuring that there is availability of let's say about 95% plus of items in every warehouse. Okay, in all these things we have technology which is very strongly woven into our strategy. So without that, none of these would be possible.
Sure. Manav, did you have a point of view?
So if you really look at that, in an offline retail mode, where is it that the tech could have potential to play a role? Let me give you a use case, right? Maybe you and I go to the same grocery store, which is either Godrej, Nature Basket, or La Marche, right? You spend $2,000 a week in your grocery buying. I buy $20,000 a week on grocery buying. Today, neither of them have any means to know how to treat you and me differently. They don't have any means to know how much are you buying on an annualized basis or monthly basis, how much am I buying on an annualized basis or monthly basis. You and I stand in the same queue, right? So that differentiated treatment which technology allows you to treat consumers differently is very well done in an online specter. That is on the consumer side. Look at it from a supply side standpoint, right? If tomorrow I have tens of millions of consumers, I can go back to P&Gs of the world and levers of the world and say, I have million guys whose 70% of contribution is to the lever consumption bucket. P&G, how much are you willing to underwrite on me as a platform to give them options to move to your container, right? Things like these, which have been holy grail in the retail industry, are being solved now as we speak, and which is where online grocery platforms, to me, have a tremendous role to play.
Great.
Just to add, Manav, having technology is one bit, and having a cutting-edge technology is the main differentiator. See, if you take a decade back, as a technology head, the company will be asking you to implement a technology for next 5 years, or next 6 years, or next 10 years. Today, there is no comfort of talking of technology in years. You have to implement a technology in such a short time, and which will be scalable technology which can accommodate the business needs. That's very important, and that's the key. And the technology platform is dynamically changing. So you can't decide what will be your next technology for next 5 years or 10 years. So what the best possible technology which can take you to the next levels and bring your customer experience is the key. So today's world, we just started operations in India a year back. And we are not in complete reach in all the cities. But yet, we wanted to go online, and we wanted to be omni-channel. So the requirement is just, I want the technology to enable online retailing or online ordering system in just 2 or 3 months. So that's how the business is demanding technology, and that's how the technology is transforming the businesses. Otherwise, today's the Flipkarts and Snapdeals would have not been to that scalability if they are not on the right technology platforms.
Great. Now, I'm going to ask the same question, both Radha to yourself and to Kuldeep, which is on the path to profitability. And just let me finish this, then I'll come to you. And my question is, where is the goal at the end of the journey? And I'm going to request, Radha, if you could just answer this with a pure play e-commerce angle, and Kuldeep, if you could bring the brick and mortar stuff as well, and therefore omni-channel.
Suvendu, year and a half ago when I when I founded grocermax.com, I realized that of all the startups in India, I'd probably be the oldest founder, right? Because I'm past 50, the other founders are probably half my age. So I consciously went into that area and I told myself, I'm going to undo everything that I've learned. It's like the Zen master who told the disciple that you got to empty your cup of tea before you can fill the cup again. So I did that. I emptied my cup of tea. What I've found in the last 1.5 years, the more the things change, the more things remain the same. Finally, when it comes to how you can win and the path to profitability, there is only one single metrics, that is return on investment. Anybody, whether it was Shylock in Macbeth, whether it's somebody else, when you put money in, you want a return on investment. The question is, when do you get that return on investment? I think the online has been unfairly vilified for losing money. People say that, oh, look at these big guys, like online guys, they're losing money through their nose and their ears, right? But let me tell you a small story. In 1987, when I was setting up a factory to make noodles, which is Top Ramen and Cup Noodle when I was in Unilever, I made a project report for ICICI to apply for 10 crore loan for a bank. If you look at the schedule in that project report, it said to make the plant was 1.5 years. To launch the product another 6 months. By the time you got to profitability, it was 4 years. So in 1987, a bank like ICICI would lend 10 crores to a company which would talk about profitability in year 5. The company, Indonesian Foods, after 25 years, is just about break even. In the modern age, I don't think the online players are prepared to wait for 6 years. In this country, the problem is not the demand side. The problem is the supply side. The consumer is ready. You got to choose your third point. How will you win? What is the recipe for the supply chain? How much do you want to invest? How much do you want to discount? You have to have a good balance and address the customer who will give you that return on investment. Otherwise, it's a big black hole. But I think you should not also vilify the online customers more than necessary. I think it is an accelerated world. What used to happen in 6 years now probably happens in about 2 or maybe 1.5 years.
That's a very interesting perspective. Kuldeep?
Thanks, Radha. So presently in this e-commerce basically structure, we got 3 sort of the models basically which are operating in the Indian context. One is the basically marketplace model, one is the inventory-led model, and third basically coming the omni-channel model. So path to profitability is going to be different for all the different channels of the retailer spaces over there. It can't be basically, we can't say that if a channel, basically channel in omni-channel is making the profitability, so inventory-led basically model will get into the profitability and marketplace will get into the profitability. Because all the 3 different models have the different operating cost rate over there, has the different margin structure rate over there. So what we think basically Spencer, as you know, the omni-channel, here we already got an basically buying structure in place. I already got an basically all the terms of the trade, already got a sourcing team in place. I will get in the same margins which I get in the basically offline it over there if I do the online as well. So what I am adding it over there, only the basically the delivery cost. So what is the delivery cost? Delivery cost also I have to cater it from the my stores, which is in a vicinity of 3 to 4 kilometers only. So in omni-channel, even delivery cost is going to be lesser than the basically, if I go to the basically the other basically 2 different models. So we think that we would be I think that once we start making money immediately at a transaction level. So there is no bleeding, there is no cost cutting. So we are going to keep the same basically pricing model it over there. What is there in the offline, what is the online. So definitely omni-channel is going to be I think the first one to start making profitability and then followed by the other channels of this models.
Interesting, interesting. Vijay, you wanted to share something. Please go on.
Yeah, I think Manav raised a very, very important point, and I think it's also linked in some ways to our discussions on profitability and the differences between offline and online. I think one of the key things which offline retailers can do to really come up to the level of online retail, particularly on one aspect. And that aspect I want to touch upon, is respect to how do I target my customer, right? And how do I know him well enough so that I can keep mining him again and again and again? And that to me is so critical. And it's so critical that, from a profitability metric, from any investment metric, I think that's going to be extremely important, right? And why do I say that? All of us know, right, that repeat customers are so much more valuable, right? So if let's say, if I have a choice between giving a discount to a customer and giving him a cashback, where he can redeem only at my place again, and I can ensure that he redeems only at my place, I can crack it. And how do I do it? It is important for me to embrace technology to do it. And and just in this regard, there are some mobile solutions. In fact, we also have a solution as part of Zeta where we provide what are called these cashbacks or loyalty points, where any offline retailer or even online retailer, doesn't matter, right? You target your customer and get him to you give him cashbacks and so on, and he just comes back and redeems at your store. And the process is so seamless. It's extremely seamless because it's just one tap on your phone, and you get so much data, right? You know, where are my customers coming from? Which are the offers he is most responding to? So I don't have to spray and pepper my offers, right? I can be very intelligent about what offers I am giving him, right? And in terms of, which locations is he coming from, which are the stores where I can activate? And the most brilliant thing about embracing technology to do this is that I can pick and choose which areas I want to do this. If I'm an offline guy, I have to put out an offer pretty much, in one geography as a blanket sweep. I don't need to do that. Now, if I know that, hey, these are the locations which, can respond or in the past have responded to these offers, I can targetedly spend, only to those customers. And how do I do that? The moment I need to have access to the customer, and the access to the customer can come in this era only from the smartphone. There is no denying that. I think as much as, you mentioned that Jack Ma said 5 years later it will be only the internet, I can pretty much say 10 years later it will be only the smartphone. I think, we are pretty much heading there, and that's where commerce is going. And if that's where commerce is going, it's very important to target the customer at that point, right? And to be able to access him. And, and the power of promoting something to a customer when he needs this on his phone is really immense. And that, to me, I think is critical, where, offline guys, can really come up, in terms of how they can compete with online players and with the help of technology.
Great. So before we open to any audience questions, I just want to go around the house once more. My specific question is, if I were to ask, when we think of online opportunity in the food and grocery space, what is the one word, or maximum 2 words, that comes to your mind as the biggest challenge? And I just want to hear these from each one of you. Tapan, if I can start with you, please. Just 1 word or 2 words at max, as the biggest challenge, online in food and grocery, please.
Supply chain.
Supply chain? That's why I offered 2 words.
Yeah.
Manav?
Yeah, so logistics and supply chain.
You use 4.
I think you told 2 words. The entire panel will be having the same challenge. It's a supply chain and the delivery to customers.
Supply chain?
Yeah.
Seshu?
Yeah, supply and maybe delivery chain, whatever. That's the same.
Sure.
Supply chain, of course, because I'm doing an organic business where the funnel is small. Having said that, also differentiation matters. At the end of the day, what is challenging is to be able to get the product which you know that the customer is looking for and which other people don't have, because everything is replicable. So how do you differentiate? Is it with content? Is it with how you attract your customer? What do you do? So that to me is a big challenge.
Okay, interesting.
I would say user experience. Offline, online, it doesn't matter. The look, the feel, the experience that he needs to have to buy it, the more of chances to repeat is due to his user experience with your product, your service. User experience is my word.
Okay.
I would say first is the consistency in the quality, because in food and grocery, once you're handling the basically fresh and the basically grocery as your categories, you need to win on the shopper first, that basically you keep on giving her that the basically same quality within same consistency. And second one is the definitely, of course, supply chain.
Consistency and supply chain. Okay.
So I'll be a little more specific. The single problem I have is availability. It's not supply chain. When you talk of supply chain, there are so many things, starting from master data to trucking to receiving to warehousing. That's not a problem. Problem is availability, because the back end is so fragmented, whether fruit and vegetable, whether it's meat, whether it's eggs, whether it's the FMCG companies, even the biggest FMCG companies, availability is a big problem. But allow me one more. And I think this is something that has been my great theory right through, that Indian retail is not growing because of one big reason, and that's MRP. And it's not going away. Nowhere in the world do we have a country which has MRP, which is set by the seller on the retailer. If my cost goes up, I have to continue to sell the bottle of Kinley at 10 rupees. Whether I'm selling in Malabar Hill or whether I'm selling in Mira Road, doesn't matter, I have to sell it. And that is the single problem why Indian retail, whether it's online, offline, doesn't matter what it is. So those categories which don't have MRPs, like fruit and vegetable, apparel, furniture, which are not driven by MRP, are the ones which have the greatest chance of actually succeeding.
Very good.
Yeah. Let me add on, a peripheral challenge, which is pretty, I think, important, and building on what people have said. I think to me, it's so important, in terms of targeted marketing. And to me, that's really critical to really get your customer in again and again. And to me, at the end of it, that's what is going to drive success. I mean, that's the only way customers are going to see a value proposition and keep coming back to your stores.
Very, yeah.
I just have one point, On this dais, you got people who have online, and in online, you got people who have all inventory, no inventory, and me in the middle with some inventory. There are people who are in the gourmet, food service, offline retailers. I think we have to look at it as a continuum. In '96, when I was involved in opening the first store, I was in Spencer's at that time, the big debate was how many people will leave the kiranas and shop in a modern trade, right? Within 1 hour of opening the store, there was no doubt that modern trade was here to stay. And modern trade was a holy grail of all retail at that time. Like people talk about online today, people talked about modern trade at that time. Why? Because you could see the customer, what the customer was buying, but the problem is you don't know who that customer is. Then, since '96, we waited all the way up to now to see this online coming through, which is about 3 years ago. And I think the customer's evolution path is like that. There is the kirana, which is still 75% of all business done in this country, or 80% of all business done. Online and offline retailers are less than 10% or 15%. 90% of this country is still on the road, is still the kirana, right? So therefore, those people, when they convert first time, I believe they go to offline. Once they are matured in their habits, they go to online. But you never know in India, we wait for 15 years for something to happen. We leapfrog directly to online, just like we've done from land phones to mobile phones.
Absolutely.
Radha, I worked in Gulf for a short while in 95. And almost every person used to have a pager. And I never saw the pager in India.
Sorry, what was that?
Pager.
Pager.
Pager. So I never saw the technology in India. And almost every home used to have, these landlines where you can do your voice messages. And that's what you see in all the Hollywood movies. And you hardly see them in India. So there are a whole lot of technologies which will just pass.
True. Absolutely. So thank you, gentlemen. Before, I just want to, is there a question? Yes.
Yeah, by the way, first of all, I want to thank Manav for actually talking about a problem that offline retailers don't have the data or the technology to really personalize experiences and really go and do target marketing for other brands. I think we are solving the same problem for offline retail at What's Extra. Now, that being said aside, I wanted to talk about unit economics. And why am I asking is because I was on a panel last India Food Forum along with the founder of Local Banya. And as we know, from that food forum to this food forum, things have changed. That company no longer exists in business. So Kishore Biyani has also talked about grocery being a tough category where the unit economics does not really work out. I mean, the orders are small and the cost of delivery just doesn't cover up. They don't cover up for the cost of delivery. So I wanted to know the panelists' experiences, as in, are the unit economics in place, or are we really moving towards there, or what exactly is the situation? Thanks.
The unit economics stands same. The biggest challenge any online or offline is the delivery and logistics, where the cost optimization is possible and the way forward is optimizing the cost there. So there the unit economics can be worked. Before delivering an online product, first thing is the time and the logistics cost is now coming down because of the reach for the customer is increasing by these delivery aggregators, and that is playing a big role. So once the logistics and the delivery convenience increases for either online retailers or offline retailers, that is a main chunk where the cost is involved.
Yeah. I know Kishore Biyani is not a great fan of online, so I won't comment. But, you know, the offline retail is challenged by the fact that the three costs of a store, which is rent, manpower, and power, constitutes about 80% of the cost of the store. These three things are not in the control of the retailer. Once you have a rent, every year you have an escalation of 5%. The power cost is controlled by the government, and the manpower cost is controlled by your minimum wages. So if these three things keep going up, you have to increase your selling price. Let's not fool ourselves, right? Two things don't happen in India. One, you have an MRP, therefore you can't increase selling price. Secondly, you're not in America where you can go to Unilever and say, I'm buying 4 trucks today, I'll buy 8 trucks, give me a lower cost. Whether you buy 1 piece or buy 100 pieces, Unilever doesn't care a damn. They don't give you a lower cost. Period. You cannot leverage cost in this country with higher volume. Sheshu, you will know that, right? Whatever is your TOT, whether your first day of TOT, Sheshu, and even today, when you're more than 600, 700 crores, there is no change in the TOT. So therefore, it is very, very difficult in this country because of the MRP regime to actually make great unit economics. The reason why online grocery retail believes and it has a conviction that it can do better is because you can go to a cheaper source of rent, right? You don't have the store cost, which you substitute by the delivery van. Your store has now become the delivery van. The moment you optimize the delivery van, you put into a Tata Ace or into a Nomini, you put in 15 orders, I think it becomes profitable. You can turn an EBITDA positive with every delivery, right? That is, I think, the key. What is your average bill value? What's your gross margin? Are you returning an EBITDA for every delivery? Then it is all about scale. Then you need money to get customers in. That's where you see the loss, which comes below the EBITDA line, which is where you go to acquire customers. And customer acquisition in this country is very expensive. But you have to be patient. You don't have a deep pocket. After you get your unit economics, you don't have deep pockets, you cannot survive.
Could you share some numbers? Average cost per delivery, average ticket size in the case of any e-commerce?
So do the math, okay? Most grocery online retailers will have an average bill value of 1,200 to 1,400 rupees. We know the gross margin in this country, even if you have a great mix of fruit and vegetable, is anything from 12 to 16%. Your RGM per delivery is about 140 to 170 to 180 rupees. If you're using a biker, your delivery cost is 60 or 70 rupees, you can return 100 rupees EBITDA per delivery, right? Then you have to multiply it by X number of orders to defray your warehousing cost. That is the unit economics, what grocery is actually working around. The cost of delivery is not going to go down, it's going to keep going up. Your average bill value has to go up, so you need a strategy where you get your average bill values going up, where you make people do impulse buying. And what was earlier a 70,000 square feet store or a 5,000 square feet store has become a store of the size of 6 inches by 4 inches, right? Not 6 inches, sorry, 4 inches by 3 inches. That's your store. And in that mobile, you have to do everything. That is the big challenge. The skill to sell extra to a customer is a very big challenge in online. But unit economics exists.
Yeah, just to tell on the unit economics part, in Big Basket, the largest operation is in Bangalore. And about a year back in December, it was breaking even the operating cost positive for the Bangalore region. And after that, we have said that, we want to grow much faster, and we have added 2 more ways of delivery. One is called an express delivery, which is, delivery within 1 hour. And second is called a just-in-time delivery, where a product which is not available with us, but let us say available with a manufacturer or a distributor, we pick it up and deliver it the next day. And both these have, made it negative. And actually today morning we were having a review with the regions. And again in March, we will be, we will be positive, okay, operating profit positive.
So I think where most people do their unit economics calculation is from what they actually see in the market, right? What you actually don't see is the back end where the real innovation is happening. People on bikes were delivering for last 10 years, right? But there was a station manager routing out a chart. But now we have GPS, which basically makes batch deliveries possible. This is a very, very rudimentary example which I'm giving you. But if you chart out every area which you're losing money on, or every area where is a potential, a loss center, you can actually have technology used very, very efficiently to bring down costs. We have seen that happening across logistics companies. So, existing logistics companies getting disrupted by delivery and other companies. We've seen it happening in other sectors within logistics in warehousing. So there are companies like Grey Orange, which are just innovating and automating the entire warehouses, which reduces your cost by half. The assumption is basically on what you see. What you see is the back-end innovation where the real action is happening.
Any other question? Yes, please.
So I heard a lot of passion around Unilever and the challenges with pricing and margins and things of that sort. So we happen to be part of Ashtavinayak Farms, and we're manufacturers. And we're actually on some of your shelves. So my question to you guys on the e-commerce platform is, what are you looking for differently with the manufacturers that, because you're not a traditional brick and mortar kind of player, you don't have some of the challenges or the constraints that one of your brick and mortar players may have. So what are you hoping from manufacturers, from smaller manufacturers? Sure, you cannot go back into Unilever or to P&G and dictate to them what they should do with you. But what happens with the other players in the market? What is the opportunity and what are you hoping to see?
Please. I think it's a nice question. I like this. See, a few months ago, I made a presentation to Unilever and to P&G, and I said, in online, there is something called life after sale. In India, in the kiranas, which is the mom and pop stores, when you sell to the stockist, when you sell to the redistribution stockist, your sale is done. You have no idea where the goods are going. In modern trade, it goes to a store, you can actually see the consumer buying. But after that, you don't know where it has gone. You supply to the warehouse of the offline retailer, it goes to a store, you can track the customer. But in online, there is life after sale. After the sale is made, you know every customer's behavior. For instance, I do business in Gurgaon. There are 1.6 million people in Gurgaon, right? Now, I can tell you exactly. This is actually sounds like invasion of privacy, but we don't actually do it. Nobody should do it. But it is possible to target your product to the right customer instead of spraying a promotion right across customers who don't need it or don't like it. Choose the customer to whom you want to convert. If you say that in Gurgaon, I'm going to have 10,000 households who are going to be my customers, then you target the 10,000 people. You can make specific offers to that customer. Don't give anything to the online guys, right? if you give it pretty good. But I think the key is the way the promotions are done, you need to go from, you need to do rifle shot promotions rather than carpet bombing. Online allows you to do it. You need to read the rich data which is actually coming from online. This is the ultimate data. It's called behavioral data. You know how the customer is behaving. You can actually make promotions for that customer.
I guess my follow-up question to that is, can you talk about any examples where you have been successful in doing that with with any of your manufacturers? Have you done any kind of targeted marketing with any of your manufacturers, whether it's grocers, whether it's Big Basket, whether it's anybody in the regional side, where it has been successful, and that you can use that as a model to move and partner with new manufacturers to do something like that?
Yeah. So,
Go on.
yeah.
Go on.
We've had a lot of success working with a lot of manufacturers trying to do different stuff. From a manufacturer's point of view, you just need to lay out a game plan just to figure out what works, what doesn't work. And just, so whatever is the assumption you have been selling with in traditional trade or modern trade, just go reduce that, remove that. I'll give you examples. So for example, right now there are stalls which are serving samples. There is no way of telling who has picked up a sample. Whoever has picked up a sample has come back to you and shop organically or not. Have you acquired a consumer or not? Right, we can do that. So the entire customer life cycle. So you have no visibility on how many people actually entered your stall. So let's call it awareness. How many people actually picked up the product? Let's call it a trial or sampling. How many people after having tasted your product actually came back? So let's call it retention. So whatever you're doing right now here can be actually pinpointly, accurately done using online data. And we're doing that. So we're doing it across brands, we're doing it across categories. And this is only one example, right? Imagine another scenario where, let's say you're servicing a traditional trade retailer, and we have a lot of traditional trade retailers and modern trade retailers live on our platform. A lot of brands do not have information on what is going inside the store, right? So you don't know whether your product is listed, it is selling or not. You might have certain visibility in modern trade, but absolutely no visibility in traditional trade, right? But let's say if a person has ordered your product online, if a guy has gone to pick it up and it's not there on the shelf, you've immediately captured the difference between supply and demand, right? So if a person has searched your product, has ordered it, you've captured demand. It's not there on the shelf, that's a lack of supply. So to all the manufacturers and everybody in the ecosystem, just drop the assumptions which you have been working with. You know, this is how the industry works. Just drop all assumptions. Whatever data point you need to start capturing is something which can be captured easily, gets inputted to brand, product, MRP pricing, to marketing, to supply chain, and basically then you can drastically improve your business from there.
I'll give you a specific example. A couple of months ago, we got a manufacturer who wanted to produce sugar-free jam for diabetics. So he said, is it a good idea to do it? So St. Dalfo has a sugar-free jam. We made an offer to all the people who had bought sugar-free, which is aspartame, the customers who in the last 6 months who had actually bought aspartame, aspartame-based sugar-free or Splenda, whatever. And we had something like 600 customers who had actually bought it. We made offers only to those customers. So to 500 customers who bought sugar-free and to 500 customers who didn't buy sugar-free, we made the offer. The purchase that happened for the people who were buying sugar-free was something like 23%. And for the people who didn't buy sugar-free was something like 9%. So you know the customer, what he's buying. Now, when a household is buying diapers, why wouldn't you make a promotion on Johnson & Johnson products? Right? Now, that is where you get your average bill values higher, where you start using behavioral data to really make money. Tesco is a very good example. They used their data using dunnhumby as a company. They moved after 25 years to the company they are today. Only using this data, they gave customer-specific promotions.
Great. It was a very healthy discussion. If there are no more questions, let's call this session off. thanks a lot, everyone, for coming over here. Would anyone from the group? Perfect.